Unit 2, Section 4, question number 1. So in question number 1, you're just looking for what is the answer when there's two equations. It's either less than or equal to 2 or it's greater than 2. So in the first one, so in f of 0, you're going to use, obviously, the top equation. So I'm not going to give you the whole answer. You're going to have to fill out the answers. But I am going to tell you which equation to use. So in this one, you're going to use the top. F of 5, we're going to use which one?
The last one.
The bottom, because it's greater than 2. F of 2, we have to decide which one. We want to use the one where it's equal to, so we use the top. And F of negative 3 is less than or equal to 2, so we're also going to use the top. So what I mean by, I'll do one of these. What I mean by using the top or the bottom is, if I'm using the top equation for negative 3, let's say, for example, then I'm going to write down negative 2x squared minus 1. So I'm going to write down the equation for the top one. And wherever I see an x, I'm going to plug in negative 3 in parentheses. That's why it's written in parentheses. So I'm going to say negative 2, and then in parentheses, negative 3 squared minus 1. And that's going to give me my answer. So I'm just going to plug that in for x. So notice the top equation was negative 2x squared minus 1. And all I did was plug negative 3 in for x. So that's what you have to do in those. And then you just type it into your calculator. So you're going to say negative 2, parentheses, negative 3, and then to the second power, and then minus 1.
What type of math is this?
Algebra. All right. So that gives you
What, John?
negative 19. So that gives you negative 19. All right. So now we'll go to, so in number 2, you have the same issue. You have, but you have to decide, do I use it, the top equation, the middle equation, or the bottom? So if my number in parentheses is less than or equal to negative 3, I use the top. If it's greater than negative 3, but less than or equal to 3, I use the middle one. And if it's greater than 3, I use the bottom one. So I can decide which one to use. So negative 5 is less than or equal to negative 3. So I'm going to use the top equation for this one. 11 is greater than 3, so I'm going to use the bottom equation for this one. 0 is between negative 3 and 3, so I'm going to use the middle equation for this one. And 3 is also x is less than or equal to 3, or x is greater than 3. Well, it's in the less than or equal to. So 3 is equal to 3, so I'm going to use the middle for that. Okay. Now, the middle equation is kind of like our trick equation, but it's the easiest one. So in the middle equation, it's just 8. So if you notice, if you're using the middle one here, there is no number to plug, there's no x to plug anything in for. So the answer to any of them, when you're using the middle equation, is just 8. So you already have 2 answers. The answer is 8. If you're using the top equation, you would write down x to the third minus 7x, and you would plug in negative 5 in parentheses where the x is. So, for instance, how you would do this one. See this? Is x to the third minus 7x. Wherever you see x, there's 2 places. You would plug in negative 5 in parentheses. And then you can type it in your calculator, and you can get the answer. In the bottom equation, you have the square root of 2x plus 3. Wherever you see x, you're going to plug in 11 in parentheses. And then you can find what that is in your calculator. The square root of 2 times 11 plus 3. So those are what you're trying to do in these problems. You're just trying to figure out which equation to use and whether it's the top or the bottom for the first ones. All right. So in question number 3 and 4, it's the same, you're doing the same thing. You're saying, is it, so f of -1 is between 0 and -5. So I know I'm using this middle equation. X squared minus 3x is the one I'm going to use. And everywhere I see an x, I'm going to plug -1 in parentheses. F of 4 is greater than 0. 4 is bigger than 0, so I'm going to use the x to the 4th minus 7. And wherever I see x, which is right there, I'm going to plug the number 4 into parentheses. And then I should get my answer. Okay, and then there's 2 more for number 3 also that go with that. In question number 4, I have f of 5. So 5 is my x value. That's greater than or equal to 3, so I know I'm going to use this bottom one. Say 1/3 x plus 8, and wherever I see the x, I'm going to plug in 5. And then lastly, and again, you can go back and do these after, but and lastly, I see f of 1. This is where x is greater than 1. This is when x is less than or equal to 1. So I'm going to equal to 1. So I'm going to use this equation. That is 1 plus x squared. And again, wherever I see x, I'm going to plug in 1. And I'll be able to get my answer. So those are the first 4. So the first 4 questions are deciding what equation do I use and then plugging the number into that equation for x. Anytime you plug a number in for x, you plug it into the equation in parentheses. So that is, that's basically all the steps for questions 1 through. It is going to be what the answer is going to be. So in parentheses, this number in parentheses tells you whether to go left or right, how much. So f of -1 tells me I need to go over to -1. So now I've gone over to -1. And I need to see where my graph is. My graph's right here at 0. So the answer for f of -1 is just 0. Okay. F of 2. I go over to 2 and see where my graph is when I go over to 2. It is at 1. So the answer is just 1. Okay? F of 1. I go over to 1 and I see 2 dots. One is closed, one is open. We pick the one that's closed. So if I go over to 1, it is also at 1. Okay? I go to f of -2. So I want to go over to -2 and see where my graph is. It's right here at -1. And then lastly, f of 0. If I don't go over any, if I just stay at 0, then my graph is at 1. So it's always where you're going left or right in parentheses, and then you can look at your graph and tell where it's at. So your x value is in parentheses. So look at A in number 6. F of -3. So I go over to -3, and I look where my graph is. It's -1, -2. It's also -3. When I go over to -3, my graph is actually at -3. Okay? F of 4. When I go over to 4, my graph actually is also at 4. So you kind of got lucky, it was the same number there. Same thing happens here. F of 1, I go over to 1, and I notice a closed circle right there at 1. So my graph is at 1. Now we get into some other ones. F of -1. When I go over to -1, the only thing I see is an open circle. That's it. There's nothing down here. The only thing at -1 is an open circle. So that means there is no solution to -1. Okay? Because it's just an open circle. If you just have an open circle where there's nothing there, then that means it is no solution. And the last one is f of 0. So if you stay at 0, your graph is right here at 1. So those are all your possible answers for the graphs. So that's what's going to happen. That's the only thing that can happen. If you have open circle right at the number, then it's no solution. But if you have anything else, you just look and that will tell you, if you look and see where your graph's at, that will tell you your answer for that part. So that's how you want to do questions number 7 and 8 also. We're wanting to graph 9 and 10 using Desmos. So the first thing I'm going to do is this f of x is the same thing as saying y. So I'm going to write the equation. This is y equals 2x plus 3. That's the top one. And the bottom one is y equals 1/2 x minus 1. There we go. Now, the problem is I need to tell it when I want it to graph 2x plus 3. I only want it to graph it when x is less than or equal to 0. And I need to tell it when I want it to graph 1/2 x minus 1. I want it to graph it when x is greater than 0. Okay? So, I'm going to make a bracket. And that bracket is second shift, or you can go down on Desmos. And in your calculator, if you can't find where the brackets are, some people earlier today said, I just see the parentheses, hit A, B, C, and then there's some brackets down here. There's your brackets. When you hit
A, B, C?
Mm-hmm. And you can find the brackets down there.
Where's
So,
that?
on the calculator, on the little.
I don't see A, B, C.
No, on Desmos.
Oh,
Yeah.
shit. Oh.
So, there is your brackets down there. So, I'm going to say, I want that to be 2x plus 3, I want that to be when x is less than or equal to 0. So x less than or equal to 0. And then down here, I'm going to do the same thing. I want to say 2x plus 3, but I want that to be when x is greater than 0. So now, I have my equations. If you look at number 9, it is set up just like it looks like on here. 2x plus 3 when x is less than or equal to 0. 1/2 x minus 1 when x is greater than 0. Okay? Now, if you look at this one, you can drag the mouse, drag it over. You see that it actually goes to this point. This is a point. If you drag this one, you can see if you drag it over, it actually says undefined, which is an open circle. Okay? So the bottom one's going to have an open circle. The top one's going to have your closed circle. And so now you can see what your graph should look like. So this is, the bottom one's going to have the open circle. So this is -1. That's -2. You can look at it on Desmos. So at -1, you have an open circle. And then it crosses at 2. That's like a little point. Then at +1, it would be at 4. So if I was at up here, it would be all the way over to 4. And then at +2, it's all the way over at 6. So if I go up 2, it's all the way over to 6. So I can make my little line there. Okay? So there's a line for that one. And then for the top one, this is at 0, 3. So 1, 2, 3. It's a closed circle. And I'm going, and then it crosses, if you look where it crosses at, that's 1.5. You could actually click on that and it will tell you it's -1.5. So it's like right here. So you can make your line going that way. And that should go off your graph. That would continue. All right, so you have your two equations. So that's how you graph the piecewise functions using Desmos. Now, if I've already used Desmos to do one of them, I'm going to keep the brackets there. So I'm going to do the second one and just change it. Look at this one. It says x is less than or equal to 3. So I'm going to change this number to 3. And x is greater than 3. I'm going to change this number to 3. Now I've got my brackets already done. Only thing I've got to do is change the equation. The second equation is y equals 2. So it's just the number 2. The first equation is y equals -1/3 x minus 1. So now I have two equations. And they're exactly like it's written. Now, if you look at this one, you see undefined. That means there's going to be an open circle there. And if you look at the one below, you see that's going to be a closed circle. So where the closed circle is important. It's at 3, -2. So if I go over 3 and down 2, that's my closed circle. Over 3 and down 2. So right here is my closed circle. You can see where it crosses the x-axis if you wanted to. That's at -3. You can see where it crosses the y-axis if you click on it. That's at -1. And you basically just make your line. Okay? Over here, when you slid this over, you can see it's an open circle. It's an open circle because it's greater than, it's not equal to. So you put an open circle, you go over to 3 and go up to 2. So 1, 2, 3, up to. You put an open circle and you make a line going the other way. So basically all I'm doing is copying the graph from Desmos. The only thing that I need to make sure of is this is a closed circle if you see when I move my cursor. And if I move my cursor this way, you can see this is a open circle. So that was the only thing I had to figure out. And I can figure that out by moving my cursor in the right direction. Okay? So that is your graphs for Desmos.